local issue, get some more national coverage, have more districts, more citizens in this country calling their congressmen to put pressure on their congressmen to help us out with statehood, or at least the voting right. I proposed, surrounding the Capitol if we have to, holding hands, and making sure that lawmakers will not be able to go in and out until they use the voting right. I don't know how long we're gonna wait until this happens, but just go in with the. I know that we're trying to be an activist, but it just doesn't work. We have to get some new ideas and to push this issue over the edge. That's what I feel.
Peter Ross, the New Columbia State, the New Columbia Admission Act. What would you do to enhance that?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is get a clear understanding of where our president sits on this matter. What I would do is called whitehouse.gov. The first thing that I would do prior to the elections, we would get together and work with all of the DC statehood organizations to try to get a petition on whitehouse.gov to get 100,000 signatures, because that's what the White House says. And the way we would do this would be to mobilize prior to the elections, where all of the DC statehood organizations, get all of our ANC commissioners, and get a concentrated effort to, first of all, find out where our president stands on this. This is going to get us publicity. The next thing that we have to do is enlist, which is what's not being done, people, our high school students here in Washington, D.C. There's been very little outreach at the schools here. There's been very little outreach when I go to ANC meetings among ANC people. We have a lot of people that are active, but there has not been an outreach. And we also need to unify all of the various DC statehood organizations to work in conjunction with each other.
Well, first of all, I was part of a delegation with several people here to convince Eleanor Holmes Norton to introduce this bill, because the focus has been on tokenism. So-called voting rights is not statehood. Statehood includes full voting rights and permanent budgetary and legislative autonomy. We don't get that with a constitutional amendment for voting rights. We only get that with statehood. Now, what would I do locally? Once I become a senator, I would work with the team to organize town meetings across D.C. We have to start here. 100 people going out for a demonstration is not going to get us started. We need thousands. We need to energize and organize the people of D.C. too. I would do a national organization promoting citizens for statehood in every state, and international as well. Perhaps I'll get back to that.
We're going to join by our incumbent. You're in time to answer the question, what would you do, and this is Paul Strauss, what would you do to support the New Columbia Admission Act on Capitol Hill?
Well, I would continue the efforts that I've made so far, which is directly meeting with senators, directly meeting with staff, and then taking our cause around the country, enlisting the support of people in the entertainment industry, all walks of life, focusing on the campaign to get leading thought leaders in the film industry to do public service announcements for our film. So there's a lot that I have been doing, and I hope to be able to continue to do that.
We'll start this fifth question, but first to answer, please, Pete Ross, how have you, or will you use your position as U.S. Senator to increase support outside of the metropolitan area for statehood for the people of D.C.?
As I go around the city, people, I speak to a lot of people, and they say to me, well, When you get elected, we will give you the names of people that we know in the state capitals that we know, and we will get we'll set up a conversations with or interviews with you for them. I said no. What I will do is, and I got a lot of people who are from other places in the states. You will do that. This is where we need participation. We need to get. We have people from Virginia. We have people from Florida. We have people from California. All who support statehood. We're going to locate these people and find out who knows other people and try to form delegations to go to the various states. We did this one time to New Hampshire, and this should be done with all 50 United States. There are enough people here in Washington, D.C. from every state in the Union who know people who support D.C. statehood, and we need to get it. We need to mobilize these people to get a group of 50 different teams to go out to the 50 different states and lobby in the state capitals.
You're standing in front of the clock. Thank you. Next, let's hear from David Schwartzman.
Yes, well, just to continue my previous statement, I think what's needed is to have self-organized groups in every state. We need to promote that. It's not simply enough to do lobbying, which is necessary, but we need to promote a bottom-up movement around the country. And I will work for that. Secondly, internationally, we need to put the U.S. government on trial in the court of world public opinion for the denial of our rights. The only capital in the world where the citizens in that capital do not have the same rights as everyone else in the country. You can look that up. This is a violation of human rights. It's a violation of civil rights. We have to make this transnational as well. Thank you.
John Daniel.
Yeah, most of this country supports DC statehood. I think we need to incorporate it in our fight locally. What I proposed in my website, libertarianjohn.com, it's to pull back in more supporters in the nation. But what I see an opportunity in this seat is that we will keep it part-time, not paid by the federal government, and with 2 term limits. That will be the model for the nation. And I think that more people right now that are sick and tired of the status quo in Congress would kind of feel that they would increase their support to in our local fight over here.
Paul Strauss.
I think that David touched on a very important point, which is that we have to continue to talk to people in the 50 states, but we need to apply international pressure as well. The OAS found that the denial of DC statehood is a violation of America's obligations under the Rio Pact, and one of the most significant accomplishments we achieved was getting the OSCE, the Organization for Strategic Cooperation in Europe, to find that our lack of statehood is a violation of America's obligations under its membership in those organizations. In fact, when the European observers came in and did their report, they mentioned DC's lack of representation and democracy as one of their criticisms of America's policy here. Reaching out to interns from around the world is a great way to get our message out, and I can't believe my opponent says he'll discriminate against interns from certain countries and not hire them. That's the wrong approach. We need to get everybody involved in this case.
There's a good chance that the Senate will be having hearings on statehood this year. Democratic majority in the Senate. Harry Reid, the majority leader, is a friend of the District of Columbia statehood. What needs to be done to make sure that this hearing is a success, starting with David Schwartzman?
Well, I hope to attend this hearing, but I want to point out the only national party that supports statehood in its platform is my party, the Green Party of the United States. In 2004, the support for statehood was taken out of the Democratic Party, National Party. I know that the local party supports it. So we need to mobilize people to be at that hearing and outside, and again, connect the dots. Connect the dots. We have we live in a city, as Andy Shalal has emphasized in his campaign, of enormous disparities. One of the highest income and wealth inequality in the United States. Very high child poverty rate. The toleration of these human rights violations has disempowered our movement. We have to address them.
Paul Strauss.
Well, one, I think we need to politely, and recognizing his status as a sponsor of the bill and an ally, make sure that Senator Carper keeps his commitment to hold the hearing in the first place. Sometimes when you're dealing with an ally and a supporter, it's more complicated than when you're dealing with an outright opponent. We've had a great relationship with Senator Carper. He's been a champion of ours, but he does need to keep his commitment and hold the hearing. Then we need to work with that office to make sure that the witness list is diverse and that it's not just statehood supporters testifying at that hearing. We need to make outreach to Senator Coburn's staff and Republicans on the Hill. And then we need to organize the constituency and the community to make sure that we have enough people attending that hearing so that it has the positive impact that it should be. That room should be packed to the rafters, and we're going to make sure that that happens.
Peter Ross.
Senator Strauss talks about organizing the constituency. When was the last time he organized the constituency, the people that live here in Washington, D.C.? The people who live here in Washington, D.C., we are the ones that have to fight for our statehood. And this is not being done by foreign interns that come here for 6 months and go home and say, wasn't this a nice experience? We start with getting our people, we enroll our people from here in Washington, D.C., to get our constituency to do the things that Paul Strauss is proposing.
Now, we have a question. I'd like to take a privilege to talk about the question of shadow senator. And I'm sure Paul Strauss is familiar with this, but the shadow model, one of our candidates said he wouldn't call it shadow, is based on the Tennessee statehood model, where the state of Tennessee wanted statehood, and so they appointed shadow senators and representatives to lobby to help Tennessee win its statehood. And so that's the point of that. And one of the questions from the audience is, what new strategies would you come up with to lobby the Senate to support D.C. statehood? John?
Well, as I reversed earlier before, is that I feel that we need to be more aggressive. Of course, not violent, but more aggressive as opposed to such as getting together, organizing more protests, especially around the dates where the hearings are going to be held in the Senate. I believe that we need to hold hands together, lock them in, if we have to, in the Senate until they give us a voting right. And I've been talking to some congresswomen, men, senators. Some of them don't even know anything about these forums, and I think that we should invite them in. And I feel that we need to bring them into those forums and meet the citizens and know that this is a huge concern that people have in D.C.
New strategies, Paul Strauss.
One of the best new strategies we've got is something that I initiated over a month ago, which is bringing leading celebrities and who are activists in their own right and getting them to adopt D.C. statehood as their issue. I'm proud to have been able to partner with the Creative Coalition. I'm proud that actors like Mario Van Peebles, Evan Handler, and others are going to be doing D.C. statehood public service announcements that organize around this bill. I have seen from my work with Hayden Panettiere how the impact of something like that far exceeds what we're able to do here on our own. But when you're talking about the Senate, it is important to recognize that this is an institution that has changed. You can talk about shadow senators, you can talk about the voting senators. The truth is neither one of us are getting a lot of legislation passed. Very little is happening in the Senate right now at all because of the partisan gridlock. And any strategy we have has to be attuned to the realities of what is happening in national government. It is naive to think that a few louder bullhorns are going to make the difference. We need to be smarter about our thinking, not just louder.
Peter Ross, you're contending with Paul Strauss on the Democratic line for the U.S. Senator. How would you come up with, what new strategies would you?
The first thing that we have to do is we have a lot of statehood organizations here in Washington, D.C. We have to get them to work together. Let me give you examples of the dysfunction. Senator Strauss went down to the Democratic National Convention with his interns and did one thing. D.C. Vote did something else. D.C. Democracy did something else. All of them worked independently of each other. We need to get all of our organizations. They may have different ideas of how we're going to get statehood or the path to statehood, but we need to get all of our organizations here in Washington, D.C. to work together as one group.
Yes.
The first thing that I would do if I were elected is I would say, okay, we have to get our house in order. We can't have Senator Strauss going out to California acting as a lone wolf. He should have included the other organizations to go with him. DC Coalition comes here to Washington, D.C. every April. Will he invite the other DC voter organizations to participate with him in getting them to support our statehood? This can't be a lone wolf operation.
Who didn't respond to this question, David?
Well,
Of course.
we have a bill that's pending in DC government to fund the statehood delegation, roughly $1 million. We should all go to our council people and chair and urge that this be passed. This would make a big difference in the ability of our delegation to do the lobbying, to organize, and so on. So we have to create an earthquake locally, an earthquake of outrage, of mass outrage. If we have civil disobedience, it should be thousands, not 100, 1,000. And again, the key to that is linking the issues of human rights together. They're all interrelated. And I also pledge to reach out to the global Greens. There are Green parties and progressive parties all over the world that will support our struggle. Again, this is part of the international aspect of the struggle. Thank you.
Let's go back to the regular order. This is going to be the final question. We have, there are two questions that are almost the same, and I'll just introduce them. But first, this is a question I think ought to be addressed. And it's certainly in this forum because it speaks to an issue that I guess only people in the District of Columbia, and particularly those who are running for office, U.S. Senator, might be able to resolve. Would you support the U.S. to vote to retrocede the District of Columbia to Maryland so that the citizens of the District of Columbia would then be able to vote for 2 senators and a representative? Is that what the question?
I'll be happy to answer that, and I'm going to say unequivocally.
Go ahead, you finish your answer.
I would say unequivocally no. I do not want to see Washington, D.C. Ceded back to Maryland. We have different priorities. We are different from the state of Maryland. I would not accept that even as a partial way to getting full voting representation.
I think that was the gist of the question, would this be a partial measure? Okay, John Daniel.
Absolutely not. Non-negotiable.
David Schwartzman.
Of course not, but why Maryland? What about Vermont? Of course not. We need to finish the unfinished agenda of the March on Washington 50 years ago, and that is to get full self-determination for our people in D.C.
Paul Strauss.
No, I don't support retrocession. Neither does anybody I know in Maryland. DC doesn't want to go back. They don't want us back. And the only people who seem to be advocating this shotgun wedding are people from the other side of the country who at least are recognizing that our unequal status is inappropriate. So we should at least grant them the recognition that comes from acknowledging there's a problem to be fixed. But it is a ridiculous solution. Voting for somebody's other senator is not the answer. We want the right to elect our own. And frankly, trading the tyranny of the dome on Capitol Hill or being subordinate to a dome all the way in Annapolis doesn't do much to advance our self-determination either, and that's equally important than the federal representation question as well. We want to be our own state, not somebody part of anybody else's.
And finally, we have two questions that are, I will kind of merge into one question. They both deal with the fact that you all have been involved in this subject for many years, been residents of the district. Why are we still talking about this? Why hasn't it been resolved? David, John, Peter, Paul. Sounds like a bit.
Well, I'm going to return to my point before. Home rule is a shackle. We have to push the limits of home rule to break it. And that means we got to fight for progressive taxation. We have to fight for a living wage for all workers. We have to fight for a DC public bank instead of putting our money in Wall Street banks. It really is no good. We need to fight for the elimination of poverty, starting with child poverty. It's achievable. That will help to empower the statehood movement. I don't see this as disconnected. Every struggle is connected. We have to bring people together. Do I have 19 more seconds? I'm going to stop there.
I believe that we need to try different parties, maybe not electing the same senator for the past 18 years, no disrespect, but I feel that we need to try something new, and I'm energized. I believe that I can push this issue over the edge. I don't like to sleep. I will work hard for you guys to get statehood, and I feel that if by the first term I don't get statehood, I will be too embarrassed to run for a second, for re-election. And I feel that if I do get statehood, and I will get statehood, I will have only 2 term limits. I promise you that.
May I ask that you read that question again? I think somehow we got.
Let me see. We've spent a lot of time working on this subject, many years combined, working on this subject. Why are we still talking about it? Why hasn't it been resolved?
I think part of the problem is that we have a senator or a delegation that treats this as a part-time job. A vow that I would make is that if elected, I would be working 10 to 12 hours a day, 24/7. Well, that may be an exaggeration, but I would be working full-time for statehood. I think this is one of the things that we need: two full-time senators and a full-time representative working together in collaboration with all of the DC organizations that are supporting statehood. And this is what we need: full-time people, not people treating this as a part-time job.
Paul Strauss, you have the last word on this subject.
Well, believe it or not, the main obstacle to statehood isn't necessarily the number of hours that I or Senator Brown or somebody else in the day works on this job, although we work many, many hours. There's this benign myth out there that the American people are good people, and if they just knew that we didn't have voting rights, they would rise up in unison and demand that Congress do the right thing. The reality is that our movement to get us equal rights has opposition. Dare I say it, it has enemies. There are people, not just on Capitol Hill, but out in other parts of the country, that absolutely do not want to see DC represented in the Senate. They do not want to see DC represented in the House, because they do not like the way that they perceive DC senators or representatives who will vote. There is the NRA, and they don't like our position on guns. There are right-wing radicals on abortion who want to see DC women treated as federal property, and they don't like our respecting constitutional choice. There have been folks that disagree with us when it came to protecting human rights for everybody. And they, when we begin to make a little bit of progress, come up and they fight us. So the issue is not what we're necessarily doing here. There is really a vast right-wing conspiracy, and they do not support DC statehood, and they spend as many hours as Pete or anybody else is ready to spend working for us against us. And the way to win that fight is with real resources, is with influential friends, and it is with bringing about a national political realignment.
Thank you. Thank you. Before you leave the stage, there was a question about the adoption of the DC theme song, Taxation Without Representation. Show of hands, have you heard it? Okay. We won't ask that question. Thank you all very much.